has taken over. Let's go. It's Ferrall. Coast to coast. Steaks, chicks, stacks. You and I are going to make a lot of money. It's Ferrall, coast to coast.
And we are back, hour number 2 here. Ferrall, coast to coast on a Monday. Carver High in for Scotty on SportsGrid and SportsGrid Radio. Great to have everybody with us here today. Always good to have our man Adam Kaufman with us from up in Boston. You see him, of course, on the weekends and during our primetime NFL coverage, getting you all ready for the big games. And Adam is with us now because we don't have too many guys getting chopped so far since the season ended yesterday. But Boston is one of the places where it did happen. Jerod Mayo out after one season. Adam, good to see you as always, my man. And we will start with this. Did you think 1 year is a sufficient enough time for Jerod Mayo to be let go as the coach of the Patriots?
I think you could fence ride that one. You could argue both sides. You know, Bill Belichick, who obviously was here for basically 25 years, and doesn't even count his time as, a coordinator and assistant and all that stuff. He long said of just being a coach in general, you need more than 1 year to build a program. In fact, he would argue you need a handful of years. He used to, in press conferences, scoff at the idea of guys who are one and done elsewhere. Not that I think he's too sad right now that his hand-picked successor by Robert Kraft, the owner, is one and done. I think it's bigger than whether or not Mayo was going to develop into a good head coach. And maybe he will somewhere else. But I think it was very clear for those of us that were paying close attention to this team on a weekly basis, and probably a lot of people that were, sort of doing that 10,000-foot national view as well, that this guy was just in over his head. And, saying nothing of Jerod Mayo, the man, I think he's a good guy. He's obviously a nice guy, affable guy, personable guy, well-liked by the media, all that stuff. Just simply not ready to be a head coach in the NFL. Robert Kraft, in meeting with the media earlier today, said as much. He deeply regretted the position that he put Mayo in, and said, it is on him, the owner, for making this mistake and, going with his gut and going the wrong way with it. I just think that it's very rare that a guy ascends from not even being a coordinator, be it offensive or defensive, in title, in responsibility, to the role of head coach and has immediate success. There's I guess it's worth acknowledging, too, that he was put in a position kind of to fail. Not intentionally, but he was. There's just so little talent on this Patriots team, both sides of the ball. They're incredibly talent deficient. They have drafted like crap for years, which obviously goes back to the Belichick regime. Hell, it goes back to when Tom Brady was still a Patriot, that drafts had been a problem in New England. And so I just don't know realistically what kind of success people really thought Mayo was going to have. The larger issue was that he just always seemed like he was a mess. Meeting with the media, the press conferences were a disaster. It seemed like people were never really on the same page between he, the front office, his coordinators, his staff, the coaching staff. So it was time to cut bait, obviously write a big check for the duration of that contract, and bring in somebody who is either established, like Mike Vrabel, who's the popular name, and I know you brought him up, or someone even like a Ben Johnson, who, no, he hasn't been a head coach, but we know what he has achieved as a solidified offensive coordinator there in Detroit.
I think, Adam, from the outside, and not everybody thinks this, and I'll say I do as well, I'm not sure he gets fired if Mike Vrabel's not available. I think that maybe he gets another crack at it if Mike Vrabel, and I'll also say this, I went and looked. They hired Mayo on January 13th last year. Mm-hmm. Vrabel was fired on January the 9th. I think that by January the 9th, the Krafts probably already knew that Mayo was going to be the successor to Bill Belichick. I think if they knew Vrabel was going to be available, I'm not so sure they don't hire him last year. And I think it was just too quick and too small of a window for them to make it happen. I think Vrabel, they love each other. You've seen him. The red jacket ceremony that night, the big hugs and kisses. I mean, a former Patriot, all those things, experienced, has won in the league. I think Vrabel had a lot to do with this, and I think people from the outside, Adam, do. Do people in Boston feel that way?
Well, what you left out, too, is that Mike Vrabel's Twitter avatar, or X avatar, if we want to call it that, is him playing in a Patriots uniform. So look, the guy is, his heart is certainly with New England and the championships and all of it. And I was in the building for that, day that he was given the red jacket and honored his, as a Patriots Hall of Famer. And yeah, I think he would love the job. And there have been a lot of reports out there that he would love the job. I think to your point, though, about, was he available long enough? You know how this works and all these inner circles in the NFL. Like, they had to have at least had a sense that he was going to spring available. I think the bigger issue that you hit on there is that Gerard Mayo had it written into his contract, basically, that he was going to succeed Bill Belichick, that he was the next guy. And so they did this to themselves, ownership, to not, present any sort of alternatives. I was very vocal at the time, saying that if you want to hire Gerard Mayo, and this was not my choice, but if you want to hire Gerard Mayo, fine. But how do you not at least go through a search? How do you not bring in Vrabel or, 5, 6, 10 other guys just to at least go through the process and have the interviews and get a freaking outside perspective that is different from what you have been doing for the last 25 years? And for whatever reason, they opted not to do that and just went with the in-house candidate who they really liked, who, really won over Kraft in his years playing for the Patriots, his years as an assistant, that week-long trip to Israel that he's talked about so many times. And he just made his decision, to the, with the same conviction that he chose his wives, as Kraft has talked about a number of times. And it was just misguided and clearly blew up in everybody's faces there in Foxborough, to where there was dissension internally, according to reports. And just, again, everyone was sort of out for themselves. And so they need a fresh start. They need the new head coach. They need to blow out the front office in terms of, GM Elliott Wolf and Alonzo Hightower. They need to get rid of these guys. The whole coaching staff needs to be turned over. You have really two talents. You have Drake May, incredibly important, obviously, the quarterback. It's a quarterback league. And you have Christian Gonzalez on the other side of the ball, a cornerback who is very good when he can stay on the field. It's these two guys. Everything else can go. And you've got tons and tons of cap space to go out there and spend. And you need to draft well. They already blew an opportunity, potentially set themselves back even a couple more years in terms of the rebuild by not losing yesterday to the Bills and securing that number 1 pick, which of course they wouldn't have used. You trade down a couple of spots, but you get more and more assets to bring in more and more talent that you so desperately need. And they can't get out of their own way down there in Foxborough. And I don't know how much longer this is going to be going.
Yeah, and it's funny. I know everyone was mad at them yesterday and mad at Mayo. Like, I think Mayo did try to lose the game. I mean, he took May out. No. He didn't play May. He played Jersey Joe Milton. He was trying to get – he put the quarterback in. But like we saw it 2 weeks ago, the Raiders had a chance, they win. The Giants had a chance, they win. Patriots I think it goes to – we talk all the time about these teams should tank and try to lose. Players on the field just aren't trying to do that. I mean, they're just really not. It's in their hands at the end of the day.
Yeah, I mean, look, front offices, ownership can want to tank. Even coaches to some degree can want to tank. The players on the field are never going to tank in any sport because they're out there playing for their own jobs and paychecks and pride and whatever else. So they're not going to throw a game. I understand that. But you could have managed this thing differently. You absolutely could have, to where you get because the Bills, your division rival, is not going to do you any favors out there in terms of helping you get that loss. And I don't think Mayo was trying to lose that game. I really don't. I think he saw the writing on the wall, heard all the reports, knew that, not officially because he didn't find out till after the game, but had a sense that he was going to be gone. And, look, the cameras cut to him every time Joey Sly made a long field goal and Mayo's smirking. Why is he smirking? I mean, to me, because he knows he's just sort of, needling the organization one last time on his way out the door.
Same thing Lovey did to Houston a few years ago. You got to give him a little present. He's going out, and sure enough, you got to go and make sure. But they fall to 4 now in the draft. Adam, tremendous job as always. We will talk to you again soon. Adam Kaufman with the Grand right here. We're back after this. don't like to toot my own horn, and I know that I'm setting myself up for probably disappointment later tonight, but I hope you were with us last week on the Final Five, because we almost swept the board. We had 2 out of 3 on the power play points with Reinhart and Matthews. We hit the goal scorer line A. We hit the side with Washington. We hit the total with the over in Toronto and Buffalo. So we had a really good Final Five last week, and I'm hoping that we can now ride that wave.
Only on SportsGrid.
50 points in a fourth quarter for the Atlanta Hawks. Like, what is going on? It's like circus numbers. What are we doing?
And we sound like 2 old heads complaining. It's a tough watch. It's a tough watch sometimes. I don't mind the shooting. I just know the numbers. Like, when you strictly look at it from the numbers in betting, it's getting really hard to bet.
Game time decisions. Only on SportsGrid.
Louis Riddick has interviewed for every job in North America. And I'm not just talking football. I'm talking about every business in North America of any kind whatsoever. Tire companies, grocery store CEOs, shopping malls, insurance companies. What job hasn't Louis Riddick interviewed for?
Ferrall Coast to Coast. Only on SportsGrid.
The NBA will take center stage once football stops, and people will watch the NBA playoffs and all that. But the standings are whacked out in the Western Conference. Like, Oklahoma City, Memphis, and the Houston Rockets are the best teams in the conference.
You want to talk about a team with overs and no defense? The Wizards are your team. It's unbelievable. They can't make a total high enough. It's nuts.
Sports Rage tonight. Weeknights 10 p.m. to 12 a.m. Only on SportsGrid.
And we are back for El Coast to Coast on a Monday. Carver and Joe Raineri in for Scotty on SportsGrid and SportsGrid Radio. Great to have everybody with us here today. All right, Joe, a couple other things from yesterday. First, Bears Packers for the first time in like forever. Like, the Packers always beat the Bears. I mean, people say that didn't really mean anything. Like, I don't think so, Joe. Like, I think there was a difference in playing the Eagles or playing Tampa. Like, I think there's a significant difference in a situation like that. But either way, they lose the game. They lost Christian Watson, also the Packers, tore his ACL. Love was banged up in the game. Now, it looked like he probably could have played if the game meant something. But still, that was not something that you wanted to see. Here's Matt LaFleur. Need to wash this one away and get ready. We're going to Philadelphia.
So it's just, we got to wipe this as soon as possible. Like, it's a new season now. It's everybody's 0-0. We knew we were going to have to go on the road, so we're going to have to go on the road to Philly, and we'll figure out what day we play, and we'll have a plan in place. But obviously, very disappointed right now.
Of course, these two played, Joe, that opening game in Brazil. The Packers and the Eagles got together that night. I thought the Eagles took care of them pretty handily in that first game as well. Do you give Jordan Love – now, we saw Jordan Love go into Dallas last year, Wildcard weekend, and put on a huge performance. We saw him then almost win in San Francisco the week after that until his team blew it in the second half. Thinking of those things, Joe, makes me think Jordan Love could be live in Philly next week, but I'm worried about their injuries and their defense a little bit.
Yeah, I think their injuries are starting to pile up now with Watson out. We saw Reed again put the ball on the ground when in one of the worst spots that gave Chicago the opportunity to come back and win that game. I don't like what I have seen from Green Bay over the last couple of games, Carver. It worries me. LaFleur's play calling being almost to the point where just stubborn that we're just going to keep running the ball, even into the teeth of the Minnesota defense a couple of weeks ago. We're going to keep running the ball and not give Jordan Love any chance to get in rhythm and get into the game. They were doing the same thing yesterday. I worry that the injuries are piling up, but I'm also worried about this team being able to do the kinds of things they're going to need in order to go to Philadelphia and beat an Eagles team that, quite honestly, will hold the ball away from you 3/4 of the game. And then what are you going to do? I don't trust the defense to get off the field. They couldn't even do it against Chicago.
Yeah, and the only thing that is pausing me on this game right now from going all in on the Eagles, Joe, is I need to get through the week and them tell me that Hurts is 100% and he's playing.
Right.
Like I got to get to that point. And he's still in the and remember, it's not like he went out of the protocol and they just didn't play him because it was week 18. He was still in the protocol. So that's the one thing with injuries that you can't be fugazi with and screw around with in the NFL. These coaches can mess around with, this guy's got a bruise this guy's got a sprain that, this guy's got... When you're in the protocol, you're in the protocol. And when the doctor says you're out, the whole league knows you're out. It's just a very cut and dry thing. So I need to know, Joe, is he going to practice Wednesday? Is he going to practice Thursday? Is he going to practice Friday? Because I'm not saying anything out of school here. It's a much different game on Sunday if it's touchdown Kenny, or God forbid, Tanner McKee playing quarterback for the Eagles on Sunday. So that's the only thing that's holding me off from jumping all in on the Eagles. Because if it's touchdown Kenny, and I know they can hold the ball and run it with Barkley and do all that, I might take a shot with Jordan Love, as long as, like you, can you take the reins off of him a little bit, let him throw the football. And not just run all day long. Washington, of course, ended up being ahead of Green Bay. They beat Dallas 23-19. Now, I just saw some news that I thought was pretty good about this guy, so I'll play his clip now. Mike McCarthy is technically, Joe, going to be a free agent. His contract is up as the head coach of the Dallas Cowboys. Will he be back in Dallas? Well, he has an exclusive negotiating window with them through, I believe I just read, January 14th. Here is Mike, I guess, saying why he feels he should be back in Dallas.
I understand why you ask the questions. I don't like to talk about myself that way, but I'll just be clear. I'm a winner. I know how to win. I've won a championship. I won a championship in this building, and that's who I am. So, and we'll see where it goes.
Well, we will see where it goes. Jerry, when he did his little press conferences underneath the tunnel after the game that he does every week, obviously didn't say Mike's back. Said we're all going to get together and discuss things. This just came out, though, Joe, from Schefter about a half hour ago, 20 minutes ago. The Bears have asked the Cowboys permission to interview Mike McCarthy now. Now, the Cowboys don't have to allow that. But if they don't re-sign him by January the 14th, Mike McCarthy could talk to whoever he wants. So that is what the Bears have allegedly done. Now, the Bears are also one of these teams, we mentioned it last hour. They're basically interviewing anyone in the world like the Jets. The Bears have put in 1,000 requests for 1,000 people. But that's the first one, Joe, I've seen involving Mike McCarthy with the Dallas Cowboys.
Yeah, and you got to wonder, interview with the Chicago Bears, but the Bears are another team that are interviewing anybody with a pulse right now, so why not Mike McCarthy? And, there's a lot of hand-waving. Who knows who the agents who represent McCarthy, what kind of influence do they have in the building in Chicago? Hey, could you say or at release and tell everyone that you're asking for an interview? To me, that's a great leverage move for Mike McCarthy, which will kind of be, hey, listen, Cowboys, don't hold on to him, don't give him a contract, and let him miss out on the next hiring cycle. So it sounds to me like somebody's trying to force the hand of the Cowboys here and make a decision sooner rather than later.
Yeah, we could absolutely see that. So Jerry and Steven and the crew, they're going to have to powwow here and because that news will come out quickly. Cowboys denied the Bears from talking to them. Ferrall Coast to Coast on a Monday. Carver and Joe Raineri for Scotty. We're back after that. I don't like to toot my own horn, and I know that I'm setting myself up for probably disappointment later tonight, but I hope you were with us last week on the Final Five, because we almost swept the board. We had 2 out of 3 on the power play points with Reinhart and Matthews. We hit the goal scorer line A. We hit the side with Washington. We hit the total with the over in Toronto and Buffalo. So we had a really good Final Five last week, and I'm hoping that we can now ride that wave.
Only on SportsGrid.
50 points in a fourth quarter for the Atlanta Hawks. Like, what is going on? It's like circus numbers. What are we doing?
And we sound like two old heads complaining. It's a tough watch. It's a tough watch sometimes. I don't mind the shooting. I just know the numbers. Like, when you strictly look at it from the numbers in betting, it's getting really hard to bet.
Game time decisions. Only on SportsGrid.
Louis Riddick has interviewed for every job in North America. And I'm not just talking football. I'm talking about every business in North America of any kind whatsoever. Tire companies, grocery store CEOs, shopping malls, insurance companies. What job hasn't Louis Riddick interviewed for?
Ferrall Coast to Coast. Only on SportsGrid.
The NBA will take center stage once football stops, and people will watch the NBA playoffs and all that. But the standings are whacked out in the Western Conference. Like, Oklahoma City, Memphis, and the Houston Rockets are the best teams in the conference.
You want to talk about a team with overs and no defense? The Wizards are your team. It's unbelievable. They can't make a total high enough. It's nuts.
Sports Rage tonight. Weeknights 10 p.m. to 12 a.m. Only on SportsGrid.
And we are back, Ferrall, coast to coast, here on a Monday. Carver High and Joe Raineri in for Scotty on SportsGrid and SportsGrid Radio. Great to have everybody with us. Now, the Dolphin game, of course, Joe, yesterday didn't matter because the Broncos beat the Chiefs and the Dolphins needed that help and they were never going to get it. So this game basically became a little bit of a scrimmage as well, as the Jets beat the Dolphins 32-20. But there were a couple of subplots from this game that are very interesting and will be talked about as the offseason begins to unfold. Let's do the Miami side first. So apparently Tyreek Hill didn't play in the fourth quarter, or a little bit maybe before that. McDaniel was told on the sideline that he wasn't available. Wasn't really clear about whether he was told it was injury related or not. But either way, it was a rough year for Tyreek. Most people say he was playing with a wrist injury. Of course, he had the incident before Week 1 game down there outside the stadium. Here was Tyreek Hill, who now the story is, Joe, he did not want to talk to the media after the game. He originally had refused and then kind of changed his mind and came back around. He didn't want to say things maybe he didn't want to say. I think he said them anyway, Joe. Here's Tyreek Hill.
This is my first time I haven't been in the playoffs, man, so I mean, for me, like I said, man, I just got to do what's best for me and my family, dog. If that's here or that's wherever the case may be, man, I'm finna open that door for myself, dog. As I'm opening the door, like I'm out, bro. So it was great playing here, but.
I mean, you thinking about leaving here?
If it is, hey, yes.
It sounds that way. It sounds like he's thinking about leaving there, Joe. What do they say down there today?
Yeah, not good here. And, the ironic thing here is that if Tua doesn't get hurt for that stretch of games, right, they probably have enough wins to be in the playoffs right now. And Tyreek Hill is probably talking a totally different ballgame right now. But he is such a crybaby on so many different levels. The fact that he's not going to the playoffs and they're not throwing me the ball enough. There is absolutely nothing team-oriented about Tyreek Hill. He is what he is. He's another one of these, overly expressive and, sensitive wide receivers that has to be the center of everything. Otherwise, he doesn't want to be there. The problem is he's under contract. And again, this team could have been in the playoffs if they were somewhat competent with a backup quarterback. And that's the thing that I go back to is Mike McDaniel, for all of the good things that they've had to say to him, how can you be that inept when Tua goes down and have absolutely no answer on offense and lose all those games in a row, which ultimately tanked your season?
Absolutely tanked their season. I'm with you. I think if Tua plays 17 games this year, they're at 10, 11 wins. And, they had 8, and he missed all those games. I think that they absolutely would have got in. Now, they don't beat any good teams even when he plays. Really good teams. They don't beat any of the really good teams even when he's in there. But they had so many games against so many bad teams, like the Jets yesterday, that I think that they would have gotten by a bunch of those if he were out there. So an interesting offseason. And McDaniel will be back, by the way. That was Ross said that yesterday. Greer as well as the general manager. There was some rumblings that maybe he would be gone, but that is not the case. Status quo in Miami moving forward. And I think that number one on the shopping list this year, Joe, and I know some teams don't like to do this, but they are a team that absolutely has to get and spend at the backup quarterback position. If they are going to continue to have Tua as their guy, they have to have someone who is capable, has experience, and has done it, and can go in there and actually win games. Because I know he did it last year, but this is now like 3 out of 4 years. He's not giving you the whole season.
No. But again, have a coaching staff in place that can actually put a backup quarterback in a position to be successful.
But these guys, like Skylar Thompson, and that, they drafted him. You're right. They should have known they should have been able to develop a guy like him. Snoop Huntley off the street. Who else do they have? Tim Boyle, Mike White before this year. They got to find someone who's a little bit more capable because Tua just is not trustworthy. I'll play the Rodgers and finish this up when we get back. Coast to coast after this. I don't like to toot my own horn, and I know that I'm setting myself up for probably disappointment later tonight, but I hope you were with us last week on the Final Five because we almost swept the board. We had 2 out of 3 on the power play points with Reinhardt and Matthews. We hit the goal scorer line A. We hit the side with Washington. We hit the total with the over in Toronto and Buffalo. So we had a really good Final Five last week, and I'm hoping that we can now ride that wave.
Only on SportsGrid.
50 points in a fourth quarter for the Atlanta Hawks. What is going on? It's like circus numbers. What are we doing?
And we sound like 2 old heads complaining. It's a tough watch. It's a tough watch sometimes. I don't mind the shooting. I just know the numbers. When you strictly look at it from the numbers in betting, it's getting really hard to bet.
Game time decisions. Only on SportsGrid.
Louis Riddick has interviewed for every job in North America. And I'm not just talking football. I'm talking about every business in North America of any kind whatsoever. Tire companies, grocery store CEOs, shopping malls, insurance companies. What job hasn't Louis Riddick interviewed for?
Ferrall Coast to Coast. Only on SportsGrid.
The NBA will take center stage once football stops, and people will watch the NBA playoffs and all that. But the standings are whacked out in the Western Conference. Oklahoma City, Memphis, and the Houston Rockets are the best teams in the conference.
You want to talk about a team with overs and no defense? The Wizards are your team. It's unbelievable. They can't make a total high enough. It's nuts.
Sports Rage tonight. Weeknights 10 p.m. to 12 a.m. Only on SportsGrid.
And we are back. Ferrall Coast to Coast here on a Monday. Carver and Joe Raineri in for Scotty on SportsGrid and SportsGrid Radio. All right, Joe, the other thing out of that game was, of course, was this the end of Aaron Rodgers as not just the Jet quarterback, but potentially a quarterback, period, in the NFL? Was this the end of the line? There certainly were some things in the game that made you think it might be. I know he really wanted to get throw a touchdown to Davante Adams for the last time. I mean, they tried time and time again, and they finally got him. Some lip reader caught him on camera saying, "This is my last game." Sure. He might have meant it's his last game as a Jet, for all we know. But here he is being talked. He was given, I guess, several hypothetical situations, and here's how he responded to all of them.
Well, I've done it once. Obviously, there's a lot of hypotheticals here. So if I want to play, hypothetical number one. If they want to move on, hypothetical number two. Would I be willing to play for another team, hypothetical number three? The answer is yes.
Yeah, there you go. Sounds like a yes, Joe. Sounds like yes. I think he's not done. I don't think he's done. I think he's going to play for somebody else next year. Now, as we were kind of discussing this before, I don't know where there might not be a fit. I don't know if there's a square peg round hole situation that you could shove Aaron Rodgers into that isn't the Jets. But I guess it would also depend on who's running the Jets, because we obviously don't know that yet either.
Well, and I think that's going to be probably the biggest determining factor, right? Who are the Jets hiring in the front office? Who's going to be the head coach? And will either of those hires, move the needle for Aaron Rodgers, thinking that there's an opportunity here with the Jets, because he is under contract. So it's not like he's a free agent now. I don't know if they'll make me he's under contract. So whether or not he wants to come back, I think has a lot to do with what and who the Jets hire from this point on. And the decision doesn't have to be made tomorrow, by the way, too, Carver. So, he does have some sort of ayahuasca appointment in some sort of hot box in Arizona. I'm sure it'll all come to him in one of those meetings.
He did say he had to take some time to go back to the bunker in California.
Yes.
And think things through and recover from a tough year. He did play every game. So I guess we can give him credit for that. He did play every game for the Jets this year. So hat tip to Aaron Rodgers. And I'll just say it again because now it's over. That was even more spectacular than I thought it was going to be, this Aaron Rodgers Jets season. I cannot believe how great it was or how spectacularly it exploded there for them as they're looking to once again start back from zero. Colts beat the Jags. The Jags fired Doug Peterson, but they kept general manager Trent Baalke. So I guess he's not the problem. I guess just Doug was the problem. You knew he was getting fired, Joe, because Khan said before the season, this is the most talented team I've ever had since I've been the owner of the Jaguars. And to watch them be as bad as they were this year, you knew Peterson. He just didn't want to chop him, I guess, in season and let him actually finish it out. But Doug gone. I don't know. Is that a desirable location for you, Joe, to work for Shad Khan and Trent Baalke and have Trevor Lawrence, who has not, in my opinion at least, lived up to anywhere near the accolades that he was supposed to?
No, I think Trent Baalke is a train wreck. And I think the roster construction wasn't Doug Peterson's. It was Trent Baalke's. And that roster construction was terrible across the board. So I as long as that's the guy running the show and making the decisions, I'll say this thing about Connor. He at least waited till the end of the season. He could have moved on from Doug Peterson and thrown the whole place into turmoil. the minute that Trevor Lawrence went down, right? But he didn't. And he let him finish it out. The team didn't quit on Peterson. I'm sure he'll get a few interviews before it's all said and done. But Trent Baalke, to me, is a total train wreck, and no way are you going to get any quality coach in there that can turn that team around with him as a GM.
I agree. That is a very tough spot there, and it's I don't know where you go because you just tried the established veteran coach who has won a Super Bowl. You just did that.
Yep.
So are you going the young assistant that's never had a job before? I guess that's going to be their route, or who knows? God bless and good luck in Jacksonville. Eagles beat the Giants. Main thing is the Giants are keeping Brian Daboll and Joe Schoen. John Mara did first he put out a statement, and then about an hour later did a long meeting with the press out at the practice facility. Now, there's several things I could have played from this, and I'm going to save a few for Scotty tomorrow. But I'll give you this one, Joe. Here's John Mara when he was asked if he was upset that the Giants didn't tank and lose the Colt game last week that would have given them the number 1 overall draft pick.
John, you talk about playing the quarterback positions. You had the number 1 pick 2 weeks ago, and then you win the Colts game. And then it seemed like you didn't go all out yesterday, but why not have just tanked if you knew they were coming back?
If I had thought that we were tanking either one of those games, I would have fired everybody. We are never going to do that in this organization as long as I'm standing on this side of the grass.
As long as he's standing on that side of the grass. Now, Joe, there was a lot of stuff in this guy talking today. I don't know. Even though these guys are back, I'm not sure that they have that long of a leash, to be quite honest with you. He made it almost sound like they better make the playoffs next year, and they're going to try to do that with potentially taking a quarterback in the first. That's not something that happens overnight. I know Bo Nix and Jane Daniels are going to the playoffs this year, Joe, but that's not a very easy thing to do, and it sounds like Mara, that's what he wants them to do.
Yeah, again, the whole process here was just very strange that, he felt the need to explain that everyone is coming back for what I have no idea, since everyone there is under contract. So, and listen, great answer. If I would have thought we would have I'd have fired it. I mean, that's the correct answer. But the reality is you didn't want Saquon gone, but yet you allowed them to make that decision. So what does it say about you if you were to pull the plug on all of this at this point? I think he doesn't have a choice but to sit tight, and hopefully it doesn't go even worse next year than it did this year. Otherwise, boy, oh boy, they're going to start pointing fingers at the Mara family, and well-deserved criticism at that.
Like, they won 3 games this year. Like, let's be honest here. Let's say they somehow get one of these 2 guys. Whether it's Sanders or Ward. And let's say they show some promise, but they win 6 games next year. But is that, what? You fired him? Or what? You're starting, that's almost like an Eberflus thing from this year, right? You're going to get a quarterback first and then start all over with the quarterback the next year, even though it's just, if you're keeping him, Joe, and you let him take a guy in that third spot, with a quarterback, you really have to commit minimum 2 years, I would think, to them. You're really committing them to that kind of time. Or else you are just going to keep going around in circles, which is what you've been doing anyway for the past, God, how many years since you fired Coughlin. Just really going around in circles with the entire situation. Seahawks beat the Rams. They did fire their offensive coordinator, Ryan Grubb. What the hell did he do wrong? They won 10 games. I saw their pass offense was like 7th in the league. Their offense overall was like 10th or 11th. What? I guess him and McDonald didn't get along is what that sounds like to me, Joe. I guess they didn't like each other because I didn't think the Seahawks offense was honestly their problem this year. I mean, Kenneth Walker played like half the games this year. Like it was, that was a very strange move that happened there. We'll come back. I'm going to show Joe the draft order in the top 10, and then I'll give you all the lines for Wildcard weekend in the NFL next week. From Coast to Coast. We're back right after this. don't like to toot my own horn, and I know that I'm setting myself up for probably disappointment later tonight, but I hope you were with us last week on the Final Five, because we almost swept the board. We had 2 out of 3 on the power play points with Reinhart and Matthews. We hit the goal scorer line A. We hit the side with Washington. We hit the total with the over in Toronto and Buffalo. So we had a really good Final Five last week, and I'm hoping that we can now ride that wave.
Only on SportsGrid.
50 points in a fourth quarter for the Atlanta Hawks. Like, what is going on? It's like circus numbers. What are we doing?
And we sound like 2 old heads complaining. It's a tough watch. It's a tough watch sometimes. I don't mind the shooting. I just know the numbers. Like, when you strictly look at it from the numbers in betting, it's getting really hard to bet.
Game time decisions. Only on SportsGrid.
Louis Riddick has interviewed for every job in North America. And I'm not just talking football. I'm talking about every business in North America of any kind whatsoever. Tire companies, grocery store CEOs, shopping malls, insurance companies. What job hasn't Louis Riddick interviewed for?
Ferrall Coast to Coast. Only on SportsGrid.
The NBA will take center stage once football stops, and people will watch the NBA playoffs and all that. But the standings are whacked out in the Western Conference. Like, Oklahoma City, Memphis, and the Houston Rockets are the best teams in the conference.
You want to talk about a team with overs and no defense? The Wizards are your team. It's unbelievable. They can't make a total high enough. It's nuts.
Sports Rage tonight. Weeknights 10 p.m. to 12 a.m. Only on SportsGrid.
And we are back. Ferrall Coast to Coast here on a Monday. Carver and Joe Raineri in for Scotty on SportsGrid and SportsGrid Radio. We were talking about this guy Grubb, and you brought up a point. We went and looked. Like, I guess Mike McDonald said he didn't align. What was the word you said, Joe? What was the nonsense phrase that he gave? He didn't align with what his vision was for the football team. We'll translate that for you quickly here on Coast to Coast. That means that Mike McDonald didn't like that they threw the ball so much. Because that's what they did. I mean, they moved the football. I mean, Smith and Jigba had a good year. I mean, Metcalf didn't have his best year, but he was, Walker was hurt half the games, as I said to you. So this is one of these guys, as go for the 2, Joe Lisi always likes to say. He's one of these defensive-minded head coaches who, instead of winning games 40-20, wants to lose them 16-13. That's what Mike McDonald is in Seattle. So he's going to go find himself an offensive coordinator who's just going to plow it into the line 3 times and punt. That's obviously, Joe, what he's looking for.
Yeah, I mean, they were one of the number 1 or number 2 in pass attempts, and you mentioned it. They finished 7th in passes, 8th in passing yards. Geno Smith broke 2 of his own team records for passing yards and completion percentage. And you mentioned all the guys that had amazing, Jackson Smith and Jimba had a monster year. Geno Smith had nothing but great things to say about him. No kidding. But don't forget, he had already taken the job before they hired him at Alabama because he went with Kalen DeBoer. So don't be shocked if he's also unemployed for about 30 minutes before Kalen DeBoer brings him back to Alabama.
That's a great point, Joe, and that's probably something that will happen. And the Patriots fired Gerard Mayo. I talked to Kaufman about this before. I'm sorry, Joe. I think that this is Mike Vrabel. I don't even think that. In fact, I think it would be embarrassing if the Patriots and the Kraft family, dragged in a bunch of people for interviews just to kind of, and this happens from time to time, whether it's the Rooney Rule or other things. They're going to drag and do these interviews and we're interviewing this guy, that guy. They're hiring Mike Vrabel. You know it, Joe. I know it. Everybody knows it. I said to Adam before, and maybe I'm right, maybe I'm wrong. I think he got fired too late with the Titans, or else he would have been the coach last year. And he made a great point Mayo had in his contract that he had to be the successor to Bill Belichick, so they probably couldn't have gone around that. But Kraft wants Vrabel to be the coach. Vrabel wants to be the coach. They love each other, former player, everything like that. He made his Twitter avatar, him in the Patriot jersey already. I think he interviewed with the Jets last week simply to force Kraft's hand to go and fire Mayo so that he knows he can get him. This is signed, sealed, and delivered as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, and it was probably halfway through the season. I mean, who are we kidding? And don't forget, I mean, this was a team that opened up with a win against Cincinnati to open the season. Remember that? And all of a sudden, things were looking so great. And that was, okay, yeah. Then we weren't sure if Drake May was going to play. And it turns out he played actually pretty well. So I think this was already done halfway through the season, and they just had to play it out.
And it's funny you brought that game up. That's the game that cost the Bengals the playoffs. They couldn't beat the Patriots at home in week 1. And if they won that game, they'd be in right now. And I know that's easy to do. You pick spots all over the place. But that's a bad loss. And look at what it did for them. Speaking of the Patriots, they blew the number 1 pick. So 3 weeks in a row, the team that had the inside track for number 1 won their game and blew their chance to have it. So there it is, Joe. The Tennessee Titans will have the top pick, followed by Cleveland, the Giants, the Patriots, and the Jags. Raiders, Jets, Carolina, New Orleans, and Chicago round out the top 10. We know the deal. Cam Ward and Shedeur Sanders are the quarterback flavors of the top of the board for right now. Of course, we haven't got into combine season where I'm sure somebody's going to wow everyone and vault their way into the top 10. But that's where we stand, Joe. Tennessee with the top pick.
And that's what I'm telling you. I mean, I'm not nothing about what I saw from, and I didn't like the hire originally of Callahan when they brought him here. But do not be shocked now that they have the number 1 pick, which, you know, oftentimes is a franchise game changer. Do not be shocked, if at all, that this team, that they decide to go in a different direction depending on who they think they can get, because having that number 1 pick, it's got to go. Anybody convinced with Will Levis? And what's your other choice? You got to go quarterback. So they can get one with the number 1 pick. Do they think Callahan's the guy to take him to the promised land? I have my doubts.
You know, it's funny, Joe. We've heard for months and even for like a year that Dion would be very outspoken and about where his son is going to play.
Correct.
Do you think that Tennessee and or Cleveland are places that he deems worthy enough? Because I know, just thinking of the history of quarterbacks that have gone to those 2 places, I can't think of one that has ended well, drafted by those.
Nope.
I mean, for the Titans, you'd have to go way back to, I guess, McNair would be the last guy they drafted that played really well for them. For the Browns, we know what kind of quarterback graveyard that's been. You think that those 2 places would be on the Dion list of this is acceptable for Shedeur to play there?
Oh, absolutely not. I don't think he wants anything to do with either one of those franchises there, unless he's the new head coach of the Tennessee Titans.
You know, I saw someone float that today. It might have been someone in the Tennessee area on social media saying, why not fire and, you know, pay Dion? Now, Dion has said he does not want to do that, Joe. Dion has said he wants to be the Colorado coach for a very long time. He doesn't want to coach in the NFL. He wants nothing to do with it. But the situation certainly can align itself. There is not a coach there that is absolutely you can't get rid of in that spot. That's for sure. It's going to be a very fun few months to see where all of these guys end up. Ferrall Coast to Coast will come back. Wild Card Weekend. The lines, the numbers for all the games, 6 of them. don't like to toot my own horn, and I know that I'm setting myself up for probably disappointment later tonight, but I hope you were with us last week on the Final Five, because we almost swept the board. We had 2 out of 3 on the power play points with Reinhardt and Matthews. We hit the goal scorer line A. We hit the side with Washington. We hit the total with the over in Toronto and Buffalo. So we had a really good Final Five last week, and I'm hoping that we can now ride that wave.
Only on SportsGrid.
50 points in a fourth quarter for the Atlanta Hawks. Like, what is going on? It's like circus numbers. What are we doing?
And we sound like 2 old heads complaining. It's a tough watch. It's a tough watch sometimes. I don't mind the shooting. I just know the numbers. Like, when you strictly look at it from the numbers in betting, it's getting really hard to bet.
Game time decisions. Only on SportsGrid.
Louis Riddick has interviewed for every job in North America. And I'm not just talking football. I'm talking about every business in North America of any kind whatsoever. Tire companies, grocery store CEOs, shopping malls, insurance companies. What job hasn't Louis Riddick interviewed for?
Ferrall Coast to Coast. Only on SportsGrid.
The NBA will take center stage once football stops, and people will watch the NBA playoffs and all that. But the standings are whacked out in the Western Conference. Like, Oklahoma City, Memphis, and the Houston Rockets are the best teams in the conference.
You want to talk about a team with overs and no defense? The Wizards are your team. It's unbelievable. They can't make a total high enough. It's nuts.
Sports Rage tonight. Weeknights 10 p.m. to 12 a.m. Only on SportsGrid.
And we are back. Ferrall Coast to Coast here on a Monday. Carver and Joe Raineri in for Scotty on SportsGrid and SportsGrid Radio. Great to have everybody with us here today. All right, Joe, we have made it to the end of the line. We're trimming the fat. We are down to 14 teams, 7 aside, 6 games this weekend, Wildcard weekend in the NFL, 2 Saturday, 3 Sunday, 1 Monday. Here is the whole thing for you, the tree. The playoff tree, there it is. Look at it. For our matchups, of course, the Chiefs and the Lions will have the byes this weekend. I guess that means the Chiefs really had byes 2 weeks in a row because they didn't play yesterday either. I mean, I know that some guys were out there in Chief uniforms and in helmets, but they did not play. So 2 weeks off for the Chiefs leading into their divisional round game. All right, first game, Saturday, 4:30 p.m. East, a tradition unlike any other. The Houston Texans playing the first game on Saturday in Wild Card weekend. -2.5 Chargers road favorites with the 43.5 total between these two. The Chargers, of course, there was talk, Joe, they weren't going to play yesterday, but then when the Steelers lost on Saturday night and they said we can go to Houston instead of Baltimore, they decided to play, and Herbert had a really big day. Will he have a big day in Houston on Saturday, though?
Yeah, no. I do think that this is going to be Justin Herbert and Harbaugh's coming out party together. One in which you will watch Harbaugh own the ground and own the time of possession in this game. And the defense will figure out a way to make sure that C.J. Stroud doesn't do a heck of a lot right. I don't trust the offense of Houston. I do trust, and I don't consider them to be a great team by any stretch. And we've already seen the Chargers this year hold 13 of their 17 opponents to 20 points or fewer. If they do that again here, and most of those were not great teams like Houston, I think they're going to have a hard time scoring, and I think the Chargers and Harbaugh are going to shorten the game, and they're just going to not give Houston enough opportunities to do anything crazy on offense and beat them here. To me, this has got a 2013 feel to it all day long. I'm all over the under in this one.
I love the under, Joe. That was the first thing that kind of stuck out to me when I looked at this game, was seeing that number. Now, look, I like the Chargers. I'm with you. I think it's a game that I think the Chargers are better than them. And the Texan offense is extremely concerning to me against the Charger D. I think that they've had a hard time scoring against some bad teams over the last really half of the season. I mean, if you want to take it back all year, you can find stretches where the Houston Texan offense, I remember they had a stretch where they didn't score a touchdown in the second half for like 6 or 7 weeks. You know, they have had some real ugly stretches of offensive play. But I don't think the Charger offense will blow them away either. So I'm with you. I think we're in the same zone here, 20-13, something like that, 2016. I think under that 43.5. That's where I'm living, at least here early in the week on a Monday. Saturday night, round 3 for the Steelers and the Ravens in Baltimore. Steelers lose 4 in a row to end the season. Ravens, of course, win the North now. Now, they split this year. The Steelers beat them at their place. Ravens then beat them in Baltimore. 44.5 total. You know, I know they covered this number last time they played, Joe, a few weeks ago on that Saturday game. These games are always close, and I know the Steelers have not looked good the last 4 weeks. I know the Ravens are better than them, but at least here today early, I know it's a big number, and that tells you they think the Ravens are going to smash them, but Tomlin never gets blown out really in these playoff games. They lost by 17 to the Bills last year, but I think this is a better team that he has this year than last year.
It's two teams going in totally opposite directions. We've seen the Ravens, especially defensively, get stronger down the stretch, and we have seen Pittsburgh offensively as well as defensively completely crumble here, and I don't see how any of that changes this week. Baltimore, 4 straight wins by 17 or more points, including Pittsburgh. Feels like that's where we're heading again in this one.
I feel like the Steeler D can hang them through that number. I don't think there's any chance they win the game, but I think there's a chance that 9.5 with the defense, they might be able to keep them in it. Hour 3, coast to coast, next.
We'll be right back. It's time for a SportsGrid 2-minute drill.
Time now to play a little buy or sell. The Kansas City Chiefs, George, will win their 3rd straight Super Bowl. Are you buying or selling?
They do seem to be hitting their stride. All right, they get now, 3.5 weeks off here, get everybody healthy. Mahomes the ankle, Kelsey gets the rest. Chris Jones, who missed that game on Christmas, now he gets the rest of it. He's an extremely important part of that defense. So they're looking good. They're covering spreads now, something they weren't doing. Now they're actually winning legitimate games. That being said, that offensive line is still bad. All right, and I think there'll be teams that take advantage of that. No, I'm selling. I'm selling here.
I don't even care if I believe this or not. I'm selling. I do not want to see this. I do not want to see the Chiefs win again. This has not been a fun year watching them. They've gotten lucky. They've gotten some calls. No, please no. Jamar Chase will win the receiving triple crown this season. Yards, receptions, and touchdowns. George, you going to buy or sell this?
I'm going to sell this. I'm going to say, he's great. He's going to have a lot of great numbers here, but I'm going to say no, he won't get the receiver crown. Maybe 2 out of 3. He'll just miss. He'll do a little Aaron Judge. He won't get the average.
All right, I'll play the buy. I'll play the buy card just to play something different in the end, and he was my best player in fantasy this year, so I'll say buy there. I'm going to skip ahead, Sam, to the last one, the running back here. Bucky Irving, who's been fantastic for Tampa Bay, will be a top 8 running back in drafts next season. Is this buy or sell?
Assuming everybody comes back, Godwin, Evans, Mayfield, I see no reason why they wouldn't. I'm going to buy this, Craig. I'm going to buy. I think Bucky Irving is going to be that guy. It's a heavy passing offense, lots of touchdowns. Buy.
Fantasy Sports Today, your weekend source for year-round fantasy insights. 8 a.m. to 11 a.m.